They seated my daughter behind the catering curtain, not with the cousins, not even at a real table, just a folding chair next to the trash bins. I'm Emily, and that moment told me everything my in-laws had been trying to hide for years. If it were your child, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments, because I still remember the look in her eyes when she whispered, "Mom, can we go?" By the time we stepped through Margaret and Edward's front door, the smell of cinnamon candles had already wrapped itself around my coat like something determined to cling. Snow melted off our boots in tiny puddles, catching the reflection of the gold and silver garland twisted around the stair railings. A Hallmark movie murmured from the living room, some overly cheerful couple finding love in a town that never really exists. But the house felt too staged, too polished, like a magazine spread that didn't want fingerprints. I told myself to breathe, to smile, to be grateful we arrived on time. Christmas Eve in the Midwest could be unforgiving, and tonight was no exception. The wind had chased us from the driveway like it was in a hurry to get inside before we did. Margaret met us halfway down the hall with a smile so tight it looked like it had been practiced in the mirror. She reached for Lily first, not for a hug, but for the small gift box Lily carried in both hands. "Oh, lovely," she murmured, already setting it on a side table next to a candle shaped like a snowflake. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't notice the glitter paper Lily had worked so hard to smooth out. Her hand simply drifted to straighten the table runner beneath it, tugging one corner until it aligned perfectly. Perfect for her, anyway. Daniel and I exchanged a quick glance. His was steady, mine was hopeful. We'd promised ourselves we'd make this night simple, peaceful, predictable. But the house had that familiar tension, the kind that settled beneath the decorations like dust. Rebecca and Thomas breezed past with their kids, Kate in sparkly green, Chloe in plaid, and Owen already holding a candy cane he definitely wasn't supposed to eat before dinner. Their laughter filled the hallway without ever reaching us. "Coats go on the rack," Margaret called out, even though we'd used the same rack every Christmas. I hung our coats carefully. When I turned away, she slid behind me and repositioned them with 2 quick, practiced motions, as if my attempt had been a little off-center. We followed the noise toward the dining room. At first glance, it was beautiful. Garland weaving across the mantel, nutcrackers in matching uniforms, a table set for adults with polished silverware and napkin rings that looked like tiny wreaths. For a moment, I let myself pretend everything might be different this year. Then my eyes found the kids' table. The first 3 seats looked like a catalog display. Name cards written in gold ink, snowman cups, gold foil crackers lined up next to matching placemats. I almost smiled at how proud the kids would be. But then I saw the 4th seat. It wasn't a seat so much as an afterthought. A metal folding chair, one of those cold, unforgiving ones you use in a church basement, sat inches from the swinging kitchen door. Beside it, a stainless steel trash bin hummed with the faint smell of onion skins and discarded ribbon. There was no name card, no plate, just a wrinkled napkin someone had tossed there, maybe deciding it wasn't worth smoothing out. The sight hit me in the stomach before I could stop it. I told myself to wait, to give someone, anyone, the chance to say it was temporary. A mix-up, a last-minute shuffle, maybe a joke that hadn't landed. But no one seemed to notice. Or maybe they noticed exactly enough and kept moving. "Here's where the kids will sit," Rebecca chirped as she walked by, not even glancing at the 4th chair. Lily stood there a moment, her red velvet dress catching the glow of the lights strung across the mantel. She smoothed the hem the way she always did when she felt unsure. The cousins rushed to their seats, talking over one another, arguing about which cracker would make the loudest pop. Lily waited for someone to call her over. No one did. She lowered herself into the folding chair slowly, carefully, like maybe the chair might change into something better if she treated it gently enough. Her legs swung once, brushing the cold metal. She set her napkin on her lap, though it kept slipping off the uneven edge. I watched Daniel from across the room. He'd frozen mid-conversation with his father, his eyes narrowing just slightly. He noticed it too, the way Lily tried to shrink herself so no one would see the hurt settling across her face. The room went on without her. Without us. Margaret adjusted a set of candlesticks that were already perfectly straight. The cousins burst into laughter at their own inside jokes. Someone opened a bottle of sparkling cider with a cheer that felt strangely out of place. Lily sat there staring at her empty spot as if waiting for a plate to magically appear. And then, like a tiny thread pulled loose from the world, she stood up. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't make a sound. She just walked the length of the dining room, her shoes tapping softly against the hardwood floor. She held the corner of the napkin in her right hand, twisting it the way she did when she needed courage, but didn't want anyone to know. She stopped beside me. Her voice was soft enough that only I heard it. "Mom, can you do the thing you said you'd do if it feels bad again?" The words slipped into me like cold air through a cracked window. Quiet, sharp, impossible to ignore. For a second, I couldn't move. That promise, the one I'd made last year, thinking it was only symbolic, something she'd never have to use. It had landed here, in this room, at this table. Daniel looked over. One glance at Lily's face and he understood immediately. The promise had been activated, and I had no idea that the softest whisper in the room was about to unravel the illusion of the perfect Carter Christmas. Long before Daniel ever signed the papers that made Lily officially ours, I'd made her a promise, one I whispered on a quiet night in 2022, hoping it would sit unused forever, like a fire extinguisher you pray never gets touched. I never imagined a 9-year-old would need to reach for something like that. Least of all, Lily. I still remember the first time I met her. It was the summer of 2015, humid in that unmistakable Midwest way, where the air feels like warm laundry fresh from the dryer. Daniel and I had been dating only a few months then. He'd told me about Lily, a toddler, sweet and shy, but nothing he said quite prepared me for the moment I saw her on that neighborhood playground, perched at the top of the small plastic slide like she wasn't sure it would hold her. She let herself go anyway, and halfway down, her shoe caught the edge. She stumbled onto the mulch, blinked twice in surprise, and without hesitation reached straight for my hand, like she'd known me far longer than 10 seconds. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and something inside me simply settled. I didn't think motherhood would ever feel natural to me, but in that moment, holding her steady in the soft evening light, it did. It felt like turning a key and realizing a door inside you had always been waiting. After that day, Lily fell into step with me as easily as breathing. Target runs where she'd talk nonstop about stickers and animal crackers. Walks to the mailbox where she insisted on carrying every envelope, even if they were almost bigger than her. Small things that built a rhythm, built a life. And then came 2016. Adoption Day is a memory I can summon instantly, like it's printed on glossy paper in my mind. We stood on the courthouse steps in Madison, Lily in a blue sundress patterned with white daisies, clutching a stuffed turtle Daniel had won for her at a summer fair. She had a smudge of chocolate frosting on her cheek from the donut she'd insisted we get because new families need treats. I still don't know where she learned that phrase. When the judge said the words, official words, binding ones, Lily looked up at Daniel and asked, "So we all have the same name now?" He nodded, and she whispered, "Okay, then it's real." She rested her head on his shoulder as though a weight had been lifted that she hadn't even known she carried. Margaret and Edward met us outside afterward. Margaret hugged Daniel, then me, then patted Lily's shoulder lightly like she wasn't sure if touching her was appropriate. "Congratulations," she said. "She'll be a wonderful addition to Daniel's world. Not our family, not our granddaughter, just Daniel's world." The words slid past most people unnoticed, but not me. And, I would later realize, not Lily. In the years that followed, 2017 to 2019, tiny things accumulated like snowflakes, soft enough alone, but heavy when gathered. Christmas pajamas ordered for all the grandkids, matching red and green sets from Target, photo-ready. Lily received a clearance pair that wasn't even from the same brand, white with a crooked snowman and a tag still dangling from the sleeve. They were out of her size, Margaret said, though I'd checked the website that night. They weren't. Then there were the Christmas cards, 4 kids' names printed inside. Never Lily's, not once. She would look at the envelope each year and say nothing, but her eyes would drift to the space beneath the printed names as if searching for where hers should have been. Group photos were the worst. Everyone would line up, Rebecca adjusting her twins' collars, Thomas kneeling to angle the camera, and someone would shout, "Come on, kids!" Lily would hover at the edge until someone, usually Daniel or me, waved her in at the last moment. She always smiled, but there was a carefulness to it, like she didn't want to take up too much space in the frame. Birthdays, too. Cakes with bright frosting, balloons taped to the banister, cousins shrieking with excitement. On the years the family combined parties to make things simple, Lily's name would appear in the lower right corner of the sheet cake, her letters squeezed in like an afterthought, small, uneven, as if someone had added her name after the icing had already set. I'd swallow the sting and tell myself, they didn't mean it. They just forget things sometimes. But forgetting a child is its own kind of remembering. Through all of it, Lily grew, sweet and gentle, always watching, always absorbing. She learned which topics made Margaret purse her lips. She learned not to sit too close to the cousins in group activities. She learned to swallow disappointment before it surfaced. Then, in 2022, something shifted. It was early October. The house smelled faintly of pumpkin candles, and Lily was sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor, sorting through sweaters. Margaret had mailed her one, a lavender knit, size way too small, tag still attached. It wasn't even close to her size. Lily held it up in front of the mirror, tilting her head, the way she always did when she wasn't sure what she was supposed to feel. "Mom," she asked, turning to me, "do they not really know me?" The question was soft, but it landed heavy. Heavier than any mismatched pajamas or forgotten name card. She wasn't asking about a sweater. She was asking about her place in their hearts, about belonging, about whether the people who called her family truly saw her at all. I sat beside her on the floor. "Why do you ask, honey?" She shrugged, folding the sweater carefully. "They get other kids things they actually like, things that fit. I don't think they know what I like or who I am." There was no accusation in her voice, just observation, stated plainly. That hurt more than anger would have. That night, after she brushed her teeth and climbed into bed, I sat with her in the soft glow of her nightlight. The wind rattled the window a little. Madison's way of reminding us fall had officially arrived. Lily stared at the ceiling, quiet in that thoughtful way she sometimes was. "Lily," I said gently, "I want you to listen to me." She turned her head. "If you ever feel unwelcome there, really unwelcome, you tell me, and we'll go. We won't stay just to make things easier for everyone else. You don't ever have to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's idea of family." She studied my face, making sure I meant it. "I just have to tell you?" "Yes," I whispered. "You won't have to say it twice." She nodded once, satisfied. "Okay." I thought that promise would live quietly in some dusty corner of our lives, never needed, never invoked. But then came Christmas Eve 2023. The look on her face, the way she held her wrinkled napkin, the way her voice barely rose above a whisper, pulled every memory forward, stringing 7 years of moments into one single truth. The promise wasn't symbolic anymore. It was real. It was happening. And Daniel saw her face. And in an instant, he knew what she had asked for. Daniel tapped his glass, just once, the way people do before offering a sentimental toast. That tiny sound sliced through the Carter dining room more cleanly than any knife on the table. It rang against the silverware, against the curated perfection of Margaret's centerpieces, against every year we had tried, truly tried, to make this family work. And then the whole room went still. Margaret looked delighted at first. She straightened in her seat, smoothing the red table runner with 2 quick passes of her palms, expecting something sweet and flattering. Maybe a word of thanks for the ham or the sugared cranberries she insisted on making the same way every Christmas since 1998. Holiday music drifted in from the living room, all soft strings and bells. The scent of stuffing filled the air. Everything looked exactly the way Margaret wanted it. But Daniel wasn't smiling. He held his glass steady, his jaw tight, and said in a voice even and unmistakably calm, "To the last family event we'll ever attend." The words fell into the room like a dropped ornament, shattering so cleanly no one dared move at first. Rebecca gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if she were auditioning for a role in a community theater drama. Her kids stopped mid-giggle, wide-eyed, popcorn ceilings reflecting in their snowman cups. Edward didn't lift his gaze. He stared directly at his plate, as though the mashed potatoes might give him instructions on what to do next. Somewhere down the table, a fork clattered to the floor and no one bent to pick it up. Meanwhile, the absurdly cheerful Hallmark movie in the next room kept playing, a couple laughing in freshly fallen snow while we all sat frozen in the real thing. I could feel my heartbeat in my palms, in my ears, everywhere. Lily's hand slipped into mine under the table, her fingers trembling so lightly I almost missed it. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shrinking. She was watching, quiet, steady, her little chest rising and falling as she tried to make sense of the moment unfolding around her. Margaret was the first to find her voice, or at least try to. "Daniel, what on earth?" But he didn't let her finish. He walked around the table with slow, deliberate steps, each one echoing just faintly against the hardwood floors. His chair didn't scrape. Nothing scraped. It was like even the furniture understood that this was not a moment to interrupt. He reached the head of the table, Margaret's place, and slid a white envelope between her plate and Edward's. It landed with the softest whisper, but somehow it sounded louder than Daniel's toast. Margaret stared at it, her hand tightening on the edge of her napkin. "What is this?" she asked, though her voice wavered like she already knew she didn't want the answer. Daniel didn't answer. He only nodded once, the same way he does when something is final. The room shifted then, not in movement, but in mood, like the temperature had dropped a few degrees though the thermostat hadn't changed. Rebecca's mouth opened, closed, then opened again, searching for a sentence that wouldn't come. Thomas blinked rapidly like he wanted to say something fair, something placating, but couldn't find his footing on the floor of the moment. And not one person called Lily's name. Not one person reached for her or asked why a 9-year-old would leave a table like that. Not one person even looked at her. I felt something inside me go still, quiet in a way that wasn't fear anymore. I stood up slowly, the legs of my chair brushing the rug in a soft sigh. Lily did the same, still gripping my hand. Daniel met us at the end of the table, his face steady, his shoulders squared like a man who had finally put down something he'd been carrying far too long. "Let's go," he said softly. We walked toward the entryway. No one followed. No one protested. No one tried to soften anything about this moment, not even out of politeness. Margaret had frozen in place, staring at the envelope like it might rearrange itself if she looked long enough. Edward's fork remained untouched on the edge of his plate. The garland on the banister brushed against my coat as we passed, shedding a little fleck of glitter onto Lily's shoulder. It felt strangely symbolic, an imprint of what this house cared about, clinging for just a second before falling away. When we stepped outside, the cold hit like a release. The air was sharp and clean in a way the dining room hadn't been. Snow crunched beneath our boots, and the quiet of the neighborhood felt almost sacred. For a moment, I just breathed. The Christmas lights from nearby houses glowed softly through the thin veil of falling snow, and I wondered how many families behind those windows were laughing at their tables, passing rolls, trading stories. How many had chairs waiting, not next to trash cans? We were halfway to the car when it happened. Margaret's scream tore out from the open front door, sharp and wild. "Daniel!" Her voice bounced against the icy air, carried across the driveway, startled a dog somewhere down the block. But Lily didn't turn around, and because she didn't, I didn't either. Daniel opened the passenger door, and Lily climbed in, her breath hitching as she fastened her seatbelt. When the door shut, the world grew quiet again, as if the scream had been swallowed by the snowy night. I slipped into the seat beside her. Daniel started the engine, the air vents blowing a thin stream of warmth toward us. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lily exhaled, a long, shaking breath that sounded like she had been holding it for years. It was the kind of exhale that comes only when someone finally understands they are safe, that they matter, that someone chose them fully, without hesitation. I took her hand again. I thought the envelope would be the end of it. It wasn't. It was only the beginning. For a family that sends all-caps group texts about who's bringing pie or whether someone remembered the cranberry relish, the silence after Christmas felt almost deliberate. Not shock, not hurt, strategy, like someone had slammed a door softly instead of loudly, quiet enough to deny intention, loud enough to make a point. The first days were the strangest. No photos in the family chat of the cousins tearing open their gifts. No blurry snapshots of the dog in a Santa sweater. No, "Look who made cinnamon rolls" from Margaret. The group chat, normally loud enough to drown out thought, rested on the last message sent before Daniel tapped his glass. I kept telling myself this was good, peaceful even. But every time my phone buzzed, for a weather alert, a Target coupon, a neighborhood app notification, I jumped. Daniel noticed, brushing my shoulder when he passed, little gestures that said, I see you holding your breath. Outside, winter settled over our Madison Street. Snowbanks pushed up against mailboxes, and leftover Christmas lights blinked unevenly on porches. Half cheery, half tired. Inside the house, the quiet felt different. Too aware. Too expectant. Lily could sense it, even while coloring at the table. Twice she asked, "Are we still in the family chat?" Her voice wasn't afraid, just curious in that soft way kids ask when they know the truth already. "We're doing just fine on our own," I said. True, but incomplete. The silence broke on the third morning. A Venmo notification flashed on my phone while I was pouring cereal. $450. Owen's 10th birthday. Same as last year. Rebecca. Lily hadn't received an invitation. She'd only seen the party flyer taped to her school's bulletin board, a dinosaur in a party hat surrounded by candy canes. Impossible to miss. Even more impossible to pretend away. My thumb hovered. Then I set the phone down without accepting, declining, or answering. That afternoon came an email. Subject line. Reminder. No greeting, just, "We noticed we haven't received your usual contribution toward the winter heating bill. It's been a difficult year." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "We're done paying for a version of this family that doesn't include our daughter," he said. No anger, just clarity. 2 days later, a padded envelope appeared in our mailbox, addressed to Lily. Margaret's looping handwriting unmistakable. Inside was a pumpkin patch photo from years earlier. Lily at 5, tiny and bright, Margaret kneeling behind her with a hand on her shoulder. I could count on one hand how many times Margaret had taken a picture with her. On the back, in elegant script, "You'll always be family. Love, Grandma." Lily read it, flipped it over, and whispered, "I don't think she ever called me that before." No bitterness, just quiet confusion, the kind that hurts more than anger. I held the photo after she went to her room. The colors looked too warm, too edited, like someone trying to paint over the truth. "We're not responding," Daniel said gently. I nodded, not because I didn't want to answer, because I finally understood why I shouldn't. The next few days stretched long. I found myself cleaning already clean counters, checking my phone without reason, organizing drawers just to feel movement. Winter break makes time slow anyway, but this felt different, like we were bracing for the next knock. It came on a Thursday afternoon. The doorbell rang sharp and sudden. Through the window, I saw Margaret standing on our porch in a wool coat, holding a tin of store-bought cookies, the kind that crumble to dust the moment you touch them. I opened the door only a few inches and stepped outside. Cold air rushed around us. "Emily," she said brightly, too brightly. "Thought I'd stop by. I'd love to see Lily for just a minute, clear the air." A step forward. A small expectation that I'd move aside. I didn't move. Her smile stiffened. "All this drama, it's unnecessary. We just need to talk about Daniel's outburst." "Outburst?" I repeated quietly. "And about how you're turning Lily against us." My heart thudded once, but my voice stayed steady. "You did that all by yourself." For a moment, she looked stunned, offended that I'd stopped following the script. She opened her mouth to argue just as Daniel stepped behind me. He said nothing, but his presence was final. Margaret's face hardened. "This family isn't done with you," she said, voice clipped. She turned, boots crunching on the thin crust of snow, and walked down the steps with the unopened tin still in her hands. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I lay in bed staring at the slow circle of the ceiling fan. The house was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. Silence wasn't peace. Emails weren't apologies. Photos weren't love. Surprise visits weren't reconciliation. They were tools. Tools meant to tug us back into the script where Lily stayed on the sidelines, where Daniel and I pretended not to notice, where being included was a privilege, not a right. But Margaret's look on the porch, that small warning in her voice, she had another tool ready. I thought the worst thing they could take from us was a holiday. I was wrong. I thought I'd gotten used to knocks on our door, delivery drivers dropping packages, neighbors returning borrowed tools, kids selling fundraiser chocolate bars. But the knock that Thursday afternoon carried none of that familiar rhythm. It was firm, impatient, almost offended, like someone who believed they still had a claim on our lives. I'd been expecting a package, some storage bins I'd ordered during a late-night cleaning spree. So I opened the door without thinking. Cold air rushed in, the kind that carries the sharp smell of exhaust from cars warming up in driveways. And then I saw him. Eric Donovan. older, rougher around the edges, with a few days' worth of stubble and a jacket that looked like it hadn't been zipped properly in years. But his eyes, that familiar glint, that mix of entitlement and something sharper, made my stomach tighten instantly. "Well," he said, not bothering with hello, "heard you've been pretending you're her real dad." For a second, the world thinned out like sound was being pulled away. I stepped outside fast, closing the door until only a narrow slice of the hallway was visible behind me. My pulse fluttered at the base of my throat. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He smirked. "Just checking in, making sure everything's fair." His voice had that tone he used to take with people he wanted to intimidate, casual, almost bored, as though the emotional fallout would belong to everyone else but him. He leaned a little, trying to glance past me. I angled myself in front of the opening. Then he dropped her name, Margaret. "Your mother-in-law gave me your address, said Lily might need her real father again." The cold around us suddenly felt heavier, not sharp, just suffocating, the kind that pushes into your lungs. Margaret's voice echoed in my head from days earlier. "This family isn't done with you." I hadn't understood then. Now I did. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared behind me, calm in the way only someone who once learned how to stay composed for survival could be. "You have no rights here," he said, voice low but certain. "None." Eric shrugged as though the entire legal system was a suggestion. "Rights are funny things. Judges change their minds. People make mistakes. Sometimes families work things out or come to an understanding." There it was, the real reason. Not Lily, not love. Leverage. My hands trembled, but I kept them at my sides. "You need to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The porch light above us flickered once, catching the roughness of his jawline, the tightness in his smirk. He stepped back slightly, but not enough. "You know," he said, "I'm reasonable. Maybe you want to keep things simple. A little compensation, and I'll stay out of your way. I'm sure that's worth something to you." My throat closed. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't threatening exactly, but he was offering a price for Lily's peace, as though she were a debt someone forgot to pay. Inside the house, a soft creak traveled down through the ceiling. Lily. She was supposed to be upstairs working on a school project. I knew she had heard something. Kids always do. Daniel pulled out his phone. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a firm, practiced movement. "I'm calling the police," he said. Eric's expression flickered, but he kept his voice light. "Sure, let's get them involved. Maybe they'll agree with me about what's fair." Within minutes, long enough for my breath to feel thin but not long enough for Eric's smugness to fade, a squad car turned onto our street. The lights weren't flashing, but just seeing the vehicle made my knees feel unsteady. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, the late afternoon sun catching in their windows like a line of watching eyes. 2 officers stepped out, professional, neutral. They positioned themselves between Eric and the doorway, asking for names, confirming records, referencing prior rulings. The distance between Eric and our front door grew symbolic, like each inch was being reclaimed for us. "Sir, you need to leave the property immediately," one officer said. "You've been informed before. There are standing orders." Eric huffed, pretending to be offended by the rules he'd spent years ignoring. But he stepped back anyway. "You haven't heard the last of this," he muttered as he walked down the porch steps. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The moment he turned the corner, the air loosened just a little, as though I'd been holding a breath since the moment I saw his face. But the damage wasn't done. Later that evening, when the house had settled and the lamps cast warm pools of light across the floor, Lily came downstairs. She stopped halfway, holding the railing with small fingers. "Mom," she whispered, "is that man going to take me away?" The question hit like a drop of ice down my spine. "No," I said immediately. I sat on the couch and pulled her close. "He can't, and he won't." Daniel brought out the adoption papers, the ones we kept in a folder with tax documents and school forms. Lily traced her name with her finger, reading it slowly, like proof she needed to feel, not just see. "You're safe," I said, brushing her hair back. "We'll always make sure of that." The next morning, Daniel and I drove to the courthouse. The waiting room chairs were cold plastic, the kind that squeak if you shift your weight too much. I held a stack of papers, old custody rulings, emails, court orders, and my hands still shook as I signed the new forms for a protective order. The judge reviewed everything quickly, too quickly, almost, as though the case had been crystal clear from the beginning. It shouldn't have had to get this far, I thought as he signed. Walking through the courthouse hallway holding that document, something inside me shifted. I understood then, fully, painfully. Margaret hadn't just hurt Lily's feelings. She had put Lily in danger. And as long as we stayed in Madison, within driving distance, within reach, both the Carters and Eric would have access to us they didn't deserve. By the time we reached the car, the wind cutting across the parking lot, I knew what we had to do. Madison wasn't home anymore. We didn't leave Madison in a storm. There were no slammed doors, no dramatic goodbyes, no final speeches. In the end, we left the way most endings truly happen, by folding cardboard boxes, labeling things we meant to keep, and quietly deciding not to return. February wind whipped against the siding as we packed. Daniel made steady trips from the garage to the rented truck, shoulders hunched against the cold. Lily and I worked at the kitchen table where she'd claimed the black marker like it was an honor. "Books I love," she wrote on one box. "Sweaters I hate," on another, giving me a small grin. Occasionally she paused to hold up an item, a framed Carter Christmas photo, a glass ornament Margaret had insisted we match with the others, holiday towels we never used. "Do we keep this?" she asked. Most of those things went into a separate pile. It didn't feel angry. It felt like setting down something that had been heavy for too long. The silence from the Carter family held steady. No surprise visits, no last-minute attempts to fix things, no rewritten apologies. For once, it didn't feel like the quiet before an explosion. It felt like a door gently clicking shut. On our final morning, Lily stood in the empty living room, arms tucked into her sweatshirt. "It looks smaller," she said. "It always does once your life is packed," I told her. She nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad we're taking our table, the one where I don't have to sit by anything gross." We both smiled, knowing she wasn't talking about actual garbage. The drive west blurred into long stretches of gray highway. In the back seat, Lily kept a notebook on her lap and made a list titled New House. Number 1, a place for my art. Number 2, shelves that don't fall down. Number 3, she paused, then said softly, "A table where everyone has a seat. Always." Daniel met my eyes in the mirror and said, "That one, we can guarantee." Portland greeted us with rain that felt softer than Wisconsin's snow. Our rental house sat on a quiet street lined with small gardens and mailboxes decorated with hand-painted flowers. The floors creaked, the windows fogged at the corners, but light spilled into the dining area every afternoon. And for the first time in a long time, I stepped into a house without feeling we needed to shrink to fit inside it. A few days later, we found a secondhand table at a thrift store, scratched, solid, with 4 chairs that almost matched. Daniel sanded the top in the garage while Lily handed him sandpaper sheets with great ceremony. When we brought it inside, it wobbled until Daniel folded a scrap of cardboard beneath one leg. Then it stood steady. That Friday night, we made a simple first dinner in the new place. Pasta, salad from a bag, garlic bread from the freezer. Lily set the table, then disappeared into her room. She returned holding 3 little folded name cards made from construction paper. She placed them carefully. Mom, Dad, Lily. "Now everyone has a place," she said. The words landed softly and completely. No chair shoved beside a trash can, no place set as an afterthought. The months that followed came together quietly. Lily started at her new school and talked about a teacher who wore funny socks and let the class keep plants on the windowsill. Daniel found a coffee shop where the barista remembered his order and always added an extra napkin, "For your daughter, the artist." A neighbor with a slow golden retriever introduced herself, then asked Lily if she liked dogs, as though her opinion mattered. Life still had dishes and laundry and days that went sideways, but the constant hum of fear, the one I'd carried for years, began to fade. No unexpected knocks, no guilt-laced messages, no one trying to rewrite Lily's place in the world. One afternoon near the end of the year, Lily slid a stapled packet onto the dining table. "My teacher said to write about someone who changed our life," she said. On top, a sticky note read, "You'll probably cry." The essay was titled My Mom and Dad. She wrote about leaving Wisconsin, about rainy Saturdays in Portland, about pancakes on Sundays. Then one line stopped me. "They're not my real parents because of papers. They're my real parents because they saw me when other people didn't. And they stayed." My eyes blurred. Lily didn't look embarrassed, just proud. That night, I tucked her into bed. Rain tapped against the window. She curled beside her stuffed turtle. "Do you think we'll stay here a long time?" she asked. "I do," I said. "It feels like home." As I stood in the doorway watching her drift toward sleep, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of courts, not of families who chose blindness, not of past shadows. We had finally built something no one else could define. Downstairs, the candle on the dining table flickered low. The 3 name cards still stood where she'd left them. Beside them lay a 4th blank one she'd made earlier. "What's that one for?" I'd asked. "For whoever we choose someday," she'd said. Friends, people who belong. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for your child is walk away from the table that never had a seat for them. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to build a new one, where no one, ever again, sits by the trash. Sitting at our new table, with Lily's little name card standing proudly beside mine, I felt something settle in me. Something quiet, steady, and finally safe. I've learned that family isn't measured by who shares your blood, but by who shows up, listens, and stays when it truly matters. And in this life, kindness given freely can build a home stronger than any history we leave behind. If this story touched a memory or a truth in your own heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because sometimes sharing a small piece of our journey helps someone else find their way to a seat they deserve.